You eat 2 sausages, Mark?
Yes.
What about you, Carl? 2 for you, darling?
Yes.
Give your plates to Daddy. That'll do,
mate.
Mark.
This is Brett's family.
He said the other day, he was pretending to be his father, you see, and he said, I'm Peter Nielsen and I've got 3 sons. And I said, oh yes, and what are their names? And he said, well, one is Mark and he teases, and one is Carl and he cries, and one is Brett and he's got no arms.
Brett was born in Australia 4.5 years ago. Now he lives in London, where his father works as an engineer. He and his brothers are perfectly healthy, and so are his parents. There is no history of illness or handicap in the family. Brett was born without arms because when his mother was pregnant, she was given tranquilizing pills containing thalidomide. She was one of 10,000 mothers all over the world who had the same experience. At his birth, his parents were deeply shocked. They faced a choice, either to feel sorry for him and for themselves, or to cope and to help him cope.
We felt that rather than treat Brett gently, we should make every effort to treat him as near as possible as a normal child. Protect him from the obvious dangers, but he must not be protected any more than was absolutely necessary, because he was going to grow up in a normal world where people will say hurtful things, where whilst he may be quite an adorable little thing whilst he's a baby, he won't be very adorable when he's 15 or 18 or 25. So he must compete with others. Of course, we felt sorry for him while he was young, but as he grew older and was quite happy, then there was no need to feel sorry. Why should one feel sorry for a happy person? He sees the world not quite through rose-coloured glasses, but he thinks people are mostly very kind, very good people. He is inclined to speak and smile at almost anyone. People are very sympathetic towards him because he's a reasonably pleasant little boy of 4 and who unfortunately has no arms. Brett thinks most people in the world are kind. Isn't that great?
Brett is quite bright for his age, but when he was born, many people, including the doctor, somehow expected that because he had no arms, he would be mentally handicapped as well. In fact, it had the opposite effect.
Now, these children seem to be using their full potential. Now, I believe that most of us coast along using about 60–70% of our potential. But these thalidomide children, right since their birth, have had to try very much harder than the normal person at everything that they do. It has become a way of life with them, and I think they will continue to do that. And even those who have, say, below average intelligence will probably do better in many ways than normal children, physically normal children, who have the same IQ, because it is what they do with their intelligence that matters.
There are, however, many things which Brett cannot do for himself.
I think, too, there's a certain amount of resentment at the amount of time and effort that one has to give to this child. I felt very guilty about it. I used to get so annoyed when he would ask me to, not ask, demand that I should do this and do that, when he would scream so much. But because the child was so handicapped, it seemed even worse to me to feel resentful.
Brett's mother realized that her resentment was normal for a young woman with 2 other children, and so stopped giving in to him automatically. But she also saw that Brett was not just crying for help. He was crying for more independence. The Nielsens, like many other parents, had already been through a frustrating series of hospital visits. Thalidomide problems were new and so complex that most doctors were caught unprepared.
Hello, Doctor. How are you? Very well now, thank you. Yes.
But today promised to be different. This hospital had offered not just advice and sympathy, but an arm. There are, of course, artificial arms and hooks already worn by thousands of people, like war veterans. But most thalidomide children can't wear them. Their shoulders are not strong enough to make them move. They need arms that power themselves. So scientists worked frantically to give these children a special arm. Its power comes from compressed gas kept in a cylinder on the child's back and is controlled by switches under the chin. First produced in Germany, it was successfully introduced to Britain by Lady Hoare for further development in this country.
And I think this is as good as any other at the moment, the Heidelberg arm. With this and the training of the child, we can, at the present time with this arm already, obtain 3 types of movement. One is the rotation of the wrist, which the child can produce by pressing this switch. The second one is the flexion of the elbow, which again the child can produce at will. And finally is the grip in like a forceps. Now the combination of this imitates the movement of a normal arm.
Swing the arm away so it doesn't bump
Put your head right back, Brett.
Let me see if you can press straight. If you press it one side, Brett, it comes up. You press it the other side, it goes down.
Good work with
Right, now you press it with your chin for a minute. That's it. Yes, lovely.
The movements are simple, but the apparatus is complex, especially for a little boy or girl to live with. It will take 12 days just to fit the jacket properly. And, as he grows, Brett must return for a new arm every 6 months.
Right.
There.
Right. You want your spin around on the chair first? Better ask your friend first.
You've been a good lad, so we'll give you a good swing. Ooh, that's as fast as you want to go. Let me unwind it. All right?
Working? Try the elbow. That's the shot. Come over here. Now you try the other switches and see if they work too. That's right. That's right. Good. I think it'll work if you try hard enough. If you keep trying. Come on, you try with this one. Close up. That's it. You see, you can. Now you can repair your bike. That's the boy.
Like a baby, Brett must start from the beginning and learn what his arm can do and what it cannot do. It will take much longer than with a real arm, which has no switches and will not slip or jam or run out of gas. But Brett wears it even when it doesn't work. For just wearing it makes him feel better, especially in public. For these children, the most serious handicap is not physical, it is social.
When Brett was a tiny baby, I used to take him out to the shops and the clinic and whatnot, as much or possibly more than I used to take the other children, because I thought that let him get used to being stared at and poked, as some people do, right from birth. Better to be used to half a dozen stares every day of the week than to just suddenly get to half a dozen every Sunday. Old people are inclined to be most difficult to handle, or sometimes people have come up in the street and said, did you take those drugs? They somehow think that one is a drug addict, a narcotic, and take narcotics. And so they think that these mothers have brought this on the child themselves. And women have come up in the street and said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Look what you've done to that poor little child. Well, for quite a long time, it would hurt. But mothers who keep their children at home so that they may protect themselves and their children from stares and from these unkind remarks are really making the burden far greater, because the child must come out into the world someday.
Unfortunately, for a handicapped child, the outside world includes relatives and friends. For many thalidomide families felt themselves shunned and isolated. Seeking advice, they were offered only a screen of embarrassed sympathy. So they sought solutions among themselves.
We formed, while we were there together, a world organization for parents. And we are now representing over 6,000 thalidomide children that we know of. Since the meeting, we've already discovered that there are several hundred more in smaller countries, and the whole thing is growing all the time.
We joined the society because we wanted to meet other parents so that we could compare notes, not only successes, but failures. Really, the society was formed not just to raise money, not just to pool ideas, but so that people could share their problems, because trouble shared is trouble halved, after all.
I learned again in Germany that they know exactly how many children will be of school age next term. They know exactly how many will be going to school next January, and they are so well aligned for what's going to happen in the years to come that we're going to bring our own records up to date. They know what transport they need to get the children to the hospital. They've been in touch with the headmasters to see that the children are going to be taken into the schools. You know, they really are on the ball about this. They've considered it 5 years from now. And then after that, they're going to consider the problem of work.
Michael, is this the German government who are doing
Oh,
this?
no, this is the German parents. This is where, again, we've got to look ahead to much more concernedly than we have up to now. I know that we've all got our individual problems, but a collective problem has got to be taken, and Peter and John Hart and the rest of the council, the rest of you have got a lot of work ahead of you, I'm afraid.
Well, I think we've helped, in fact, in 2 cases already, because the children are just coming up to nursery school, if not junior school, and I think perhaps behind the scenes one can do an awful lot to select the schools where their children are going to be happy.
I'm going to tell you all about Brett before he comes to see us this morning. Sit down so that you can hear me. Do you remember me telling you about Brett last week? Remember me telling you that when his mummy made him, there wasn't quite enough to make arms? And how lucky you are that when you were all made, your mummy managed to make arms for you. He's coming to see us this morning with his special arms. Hello, Brett. So how are you this morning? You come to see us at nursery school. Good. You come and sit down at the table.
I've got playthings.
Yes. Hello, Brett. Brett, come sit down at this table. do some work for the children? I don't want to sit at the table. Let's see what we can do, shall we? Come along. He's grown up with the fact that he hasn't any arms, and he accepts things so completely as they are, and he doesn't mind if the children say to him, "Where are your arms?" He'll answer them quite sensibly. The children seem to get on with him very, very well, and tolerate his things that he can't do and make allowances for him. But children accept these things if you explain to them why it's happened. As they grow up, they won't look around at people and be horrified by things so much. They'll learn to accept them. Because there's an awful lot of deformity in the world, isn't there? It's the parent who's much more worried than the child about it. I suppose it's just an inborn fear of any kind of physical deformity. Some people just can't accept it. We've only had one who did show a slight aversion. She was very sorry for Brett, but she wasn't sure whether she wanted her child to mix with him. When he had his arm fitted, he was very ready to try to use it. In fact, he insisted until it got uncomfortable, and I'm hoping that the two arms will be more satisfactory. He can then be with a normal class of children and learn to write and to use his fingers such as they would. If I stand him up like that, see if you can manage to put him up there for me. Real school children can be very, very cruel, you know, to other children. Little ones like this will accept him, but when they get to school they start to criticise each other. And I think he might find it quite hard if he hadn't his arm. I think he's a very intelligent child. It'd be a great pity if he didn't remain with normal, thinking children.
Brett has to go to school in another 3 months, and we are very concerned about his inability to handle his toilet needs. He hasn't yet been accepted by the local school. The headmistress is very reluctant. She's been making up her mind for months about it.
Listen, how about if I put this sleeveless pullover on, darling? You haven't had the arm on for...
No!
Nearly enough. See, you're forgetting how to use an artificial arm now. Aren't you?
Not.
Come on, try it on with this sleeveless pullover, and then see how it is.
No!
Oh, you'll forget all about it. Where does it hurt?
On its shoulders.
How about if I put some more padding in here? You think that'll be all right?
That won't help it.
Why not?
Because I don't know.
Well, we'll just have to see if the doctors can make something better, eh?
All right.
So research moved ahead. Lady Hoare brought back from Russia a bioelectronic limb, a major development which has altered the lives of the four-arm amputees who have worn it. The Nielsens went to see it demonstrated.
That's quite nice. It really looks like hand, doesn't it?
Yes. This is basically made up of components that came from Russia, and the arm itself has been made in this country. So basically it's a British arm with Russian components.
Yes, indeed.
This is the relay system and a dry cell battery.
That's a rechargeable one, is it?
Yes, this is rechargeable.
How long will this battery last?
Well, they say it should last 3 days.
Does depend how much you use it, obviously.
That's right, and it can be charged overnight.
And I see you have 2 pickup controls there. How does this actually operate?
This is worked by 2 electrode contacts in the socket. It works like this. When you pull your hand round where you're using the muscles here. When you open it, where you're pulling it back the other way. Basically, that is it. The patient has only got to think about this. There's no physical effort.
Is there any sensitivity in regards to feel or pressure with that?
The patient says that when they've got hold of something, they feel that they've got hold of it.
They can actually feel this being transmitted back through the...
This is what they say.
But to my mind at the moment, the thing I like about it is it's a nice, relatively smooth, controlled action, but it only provides the one function, doesn't it, really gripping things and picking them up.
That's perfectly true. But once the patient really gets used to this, he can close it in stages and he can open it in stages.
This limb will be of still greater value in the future, as soon as it is adapted for children. And there are many children besides Brett who need help, like David Bickers, who was with his mother at the hospital the Nielsens visited.
By sighting the valve controls right there and then use at the moment, the gas-powered equipment, and if the other does sort of promise things for the children and we can get the right pickup points, then I think obviously one could use the lens for that purpose with the other type of equipment, more on the lines of the Russian one.
What can you do, David?
Painting.
You can do painting.
Toy.
Yes.
Drums.
Yes. Do you like using your arms? You do.
What can be done with the limbs they have? Most of these children have operations to free constricting skin and exercises that stretch tiny fingers and legs to make the utmost use of them. For every ordinary event in living is a challenge to a handicapped child.
One thing I think is important, that mothers should make it perfectly clear to child amputees that they will not grow arms. I have heard children ask their mothers about their arms. You know, when I'm a big man, I'll have arms, won't I? And I've heard the mother deliberately avoid it. Now let's come on into the shop and we'll buy some sweeties. Now one day that child is going to suddenly be faced with the horrible fact, why didn't you tell me I'm not going to have any real arms? And I feel it's terribly important that they know the absolute truth.
The search for new arms helped Brett's parents with their own handicap, self-pity, which inevitably haunts any family with a crippled child.
Because then one can see our own child's handicap in the right perspective. It isn't so great. Here are other children far, far worse off. And yet we are feeling so sorry for ourselves, for our child. If the mother realizes that there are hundreds of other mothers with far worse problems, then one doesn't feel alone.
And the children learned this too.
What's this? What's this?
Go to that boy out there. Go, don't get
There's another little boy over there with the white one.
These boys have a spinal defect, which will keep them bedridden for the rest of their limited lives. In Britain, 800 children are born every year who suffer from the same handicap.
What colour?
Well, his is an orange one.
What colour's mine?
Yours is a white one.
Goodbye to Ken. Goodbye, Ken. Come along, Mark. Goodbye to the boys.
Goodbye.
Here, is it? Bye-bye. Yes, they're going. Come on, Rex. Time to go home.
Go the way of that, Mr. Nichols. My God, that's really surprising, isn't it? You feel that, Bob?
Very heavy indeed.
Tell me, what type of hand do you normally use? A terminal device or... It's a hand, a mechanical hand, controlled with a control cord on the inside of the arm.
Their search led the Nielsens to a factory where the arms are made. It has 10,000 clients on the National Health Service in Great Britain alone. This visit helped to calm their chief anxieties about Brett's future. What job could he hold? And what about marriage? For 1/3 of the employees of this factory are handicapped themselves.
This is the progress department where the limbs are dispatched.
Through having Brett, the Nielsens discovered the meaning of the word handicap in day-to-day living. Feeding oneself, washing, brushing one's hair. The Nielsen search began 12,000 miles away in Australia. Powered limbs are so new that they had to come all the way to England to find them. The search is not over. The movements are still frustratingly simple, but some children older than Brett have already learned to write and to feed themselves, and thus unlock the chains of dependence that bind their future. This is the challenge. It is no less difficult for having been met before by millions of handicapped people in separate, personal struggles, like Brett's.